Another migrant child has died in the custody of U.S. immigration officials, what they're now doing to keep immigrant children safe. San Diego County is being told to go back to the drawing board with its climate action plan. The ruling puts several major housing developments into question.
This year, we've seen a shift, but we don't know if it's related to precipitation patterns or temperature or something else.
And could climate change be affecting how plants reproduce? A look back at a San Diego State project searching for answers. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. For the second time in 3 weeks, a Guatemalan child has died in the custody of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Now the agency's doing health checks on all the migrant children it's holding. The 8-year-old boy died early yesterday morning in New Mexico. He and his father had been in custody for a week, and he went to the hospital with what was believed to be a cold. Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke says he wants to find out how to improve conditions at Border Patrol stations so agents can respond to children in crisis.
And I want to make sure that we put the well-being and welfare of those kids before we put any other concern. Let's make sure that they're okay. Let's make sure that they're with their families. Let's make sure that they get medical care. They pose no threat to this country. Let's focus on their well-being and their health.
BP says it needs the help of other government agencies to provide health care. Earlier today, I talked to a registered nurse, Marcella Wash, who coordinates medical care for migrants at a shelter in southern San Diego. She says an average of 40 migrant children and their parents arrive at the shelter every day for a health assessment, meals, and a bed for 2 nights. The migrants have been granted temporary asylum and come straight out of immigration processing and detention.
After their claims are processed in detention, then they get released to us. Some of them arrive with upper respiratory problems, nausea or vomiting, and some of them come with very few cases of chickenpox, which require isolation, but not necessarily higher level of care to a hospital or an emergency room. There have been some kids that were admitted in order to be treated for their conditions, and they spend an average of 1 to 2 days in the hospital, and then they get released. So it's the period of detention that they don't receive proper nutrition and hygiene. So they come over not having bathed for 3 or 4 days, however many days they've been in detention. The consistent story is that they're only fed juice, frozen burritos, and peanut butter crackers for every meal. They are very resilient. They're not coming over with pre-established conditions. They were healthy where they were. Many of them have received their vaccinations. So the narrative that they're bringing over diseases and exposing us to all kinds of things is not because they're bringing them with them, is because of the situations that they're encountering either at the border or in detention. We have been very cautious and very diligent of making sure we have proper staffing, clinical staffing, to make sure that we meet their needs upon arrival and not wait until something gets worse. So that initial triage and assessment that happens after they get off the bus is critical, because that's when we identify people who, especially kids. Kids can feel kind of so-so 1 hour and then the next hour go downhill.
Wash says the majority of migrants coming to the San Diego shelter are from the recent caravan. She says more staff and resources are desperately needed to help care for the asylum seekers. San Diego County's latest plan to control greenhouse gas emissions has been rejected by a Superior Court judge. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The court found the climate action plan doesn't meet the county's commitment to reaching state goals calling for a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The Sierra Club initially challenged the plan because the county alleged there was no way to mitigate new development in the county, and it allowed developers to buy mitigation credits or offsets anywhere in the world. Sierra Club San Diego President Peter Anderson says the court found that's not acceptable.
The Board of Supervisors has to get serious about a real climate action plan that conforms with California law.
The ruling could affect 4 major county-approved developments, including the controversial Newland Sierra project in a rural part of North County. The Sierra Club is challenging the project, arguing the mitigation plan is the same as what the Superior Court rejected. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
President Trump paid a surprise visit to troops in Iraq today. This was his first trip to the troubled region. He took selfies with service members at Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq, and he gave a speech defending his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. He said because of the military's gains against ISIS, U.S. forces can return home to their families. But he says he has no plans to withdraw troops from Iraq. A number of active duty troops remain along the U.S.-Mexico border in California during the holidays. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says they've received some high-profile visitors.
The military released pictures of California congressional representatives Mark Turcano and Jackie Spear, who visited troops Monday in San Diego. The person in charge of the border operation, Army Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan, he was in California and Arizona on Christmas. The military has offered little direct access for weeks. Instead, they've released photos and interviews like this one with Sergeant David Ricketts, an engineer stationed at Camp Pendleton.
So the Marines are the best ones for this job because everything we do, we want to do it to the best of our abilities because we know there's a reason behind it.
After laying miles of concertina wire, many of the engineers have left. In many cases, they were replaced by military police who continue to train in riot gear near the border. About 2,600 active duty troops remain deployed along the U.S. border with Mexico over the holidays. With 1,200 troops stationed in California, the state has the most troops among the 3 border states. Overall, the number of troops has been dropping from a high of 5,900 just after the midterm elections in November. Right now, the operation is slated to wrap up at the end of January. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
FEMA says the government shutdown won't affect their fire relief efforts, but one California lawmaker says that's misleading. FEMA says their federal funds are separate from what's in the congressional budget discussions. So all 600 of their employees deployed to the campfire area will remain on the job. Lawmakers say the shutdown is still a problem because administrative efforts could be stalled.
Administrative details that keep the engine going, that keep people out in the field able to do their work on the essential personnel, basically the emergency personnel and police officers, all of the back office is shut down. It is a serious problem.
President Trump says he does not know when the government is going to reopen. There's worry among San Diego County immigrants about President Trump's proposed public charge rule. It would require immigration officials to consider a person's dependency on government assistance before granting that person legal status. That means looking at whether the immigrant uses programs like Medi-Cal, CalFresh, Section 8 housing, or cash assistance. The change was proposed in October. Some immigrants' rights activists say that since then, some parents have started taking their citizen children out of the programs for fear of being flagged, even though they're being advised not to.
It's important to stay informed, and we think, or we know actually, that once the final decision is made about public charge, we will have a couple months at least, to do community outreach and education to be able to disenroll if that's where we're at.
Benefits used by U.S. citizen children are not supposed to be considered under the proposed rule, but Serrano says many families aren't taking any chances. The Associated Press has found that thousands of migrant children are being held in mass shelters. John Monet has the story.
12-year-old Omar Ramirez is trying to be a kid again. That includes playing with a friend and walking to the store with his father. Things he couldn't do while in government custody for more than 5 months.
On June 3rd, we came in through the river, and a migration official grabbed us and asked me if I didn't know they were separating children.
Cecilio Ramirez Castañeda says gang members had threatened his son, so they fled their native El Salvador to escape the violence.
He said they told him that if he didn't join them, they would kill dad or mom.
They crossed illegally into the U.S. on the southwest border in Texas, only to be caught up in the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy. It caused thousands of children to be separated from their parents. Exclusive data obtained by the Associated Press shows where the federal government has placed more than 14,300 migrant toddlers, children, and teens across the country over the last 20 months. At 150 taxpayer-funded care programs, some of them holding between 500 and 2,700 children. When President Donald Trump took office, the total number of migrant youth under the Office of Refugee Resettlement in early 2017 was around 2,700. The Department of Health and Human Services defended the program. A spokesman says the government can place children in larger facilities when it needs to expand quickly. It's a difficult situation, and we are just working hard to make sure they are taken care of and placed responsibly. Omar, whose face the AP agreed not to show, was in the care of Southwest Key in Texas. The Lone Star State accounts for the biggest number of minors in government custody, about 8,700. His father says the boy feared he was abandoned. Ramirez only learned last month when they were reunited that his son had been put on a variety of medications.
One was for blood pressure, the other one was for him to remain calm throughout the day, and the night one was for him to sleep, because he couldn't fall asleep.
Experts say institutionalization of kids can lead to deep anxiety and distrust of their loved ones.
And they've, in large part, been treated as prisoners, regimented in ways that are completely contrary to the way they've lived previously.
Ramirez also worries about the long-term impact on his family.
You never heal because it's the memories that mark your life.
A situation unfolding for thousands of children who were in or still are in government care. John Moan, Associated Press, San Antonio.
Last week, the government announced it would end a portion of its strict screening policies that had slowed the placement of migrant children with relatives in the U.S.
I'm William Brangham. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump visits U.S. troops in Iraq, his first mission to soldiers in a war zone. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Yesterday's storm is a reminder that San Diego's storm drain system is old and beginning to fail. As Andrew Bowen reported earlier this year, there's no easy fix.
So we're actually at Tourmaline Beach, which is a world-class surf break here in San Diego and actually throughout California. And we're walking up a stormwater conveyance channel.
Matt O'Malley is chief executive of San Diego Coast Keeper, a nonprofit that advocates for clean water. This storm drain we're walking up looks kind of like a half pipe with vegetation creeping down from the sides. It empties right out onto the beach.
That sort of starts upstream, collects a lot of the runoff throughout the region and in both Tourmaline area and PB and upstream, and sort of channels all that down into the, oh, there's a dead rat, down into the down into the water here.
The storm drain here is not very clean. We step over garbage, algae, a trickle of water O'Malley calls urban drool, and at the very end we reach a big concrete pipe.
Goes pretty far.
It's wild.
A recent report from the city auditor's office found big shortcomings in the way the city funds and maintains this kind of infrastructure. Failing pipes have led to flooding, sinkholes, property damage, and lawsuits. The report says at the current pace, it would take the city 95 years to replace all of its failing stormwater pipes. O'Malley feels vindicated by the report.
It recognized that the city had done very little the last 20 years, both to educate the public about the lack of funding for stormwater infrastructure and to actually do something about it. I mean, it's been recognized that there are pretty strict Stormwater and Clean Water Act requirements. The city has failed to live up to those obligations, but not only that, they failed to try and do anything about making up the significant funding gaps in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Our mission is really twofold. First is to reduce the risk of flooding for our residents off our streets and properties. And then second is to protect and improve water quality in our local waterways and at our beaches.
Drew Kleiss is the deputy director of the city's stormwater division. He says the audit acknowledges a lot of the efficiencies and cost savings the city has undertaken to more quickly repair its failing stormwater infrastructure.
Overall, we're very pleased with the audit and its findings, largely because the findings are just a continuation of a lot of strategies and program improvements that we've already put in place.
That's partly true, but the audit also found that city leaders have known for decades about the lack of funding for stormwater infrastructure and have taken no action to address it. The city is short more than $450 million just over the next 5 years. Ultimately, it may have to ask voters for a tax or fee increase. But under the city's proposed timeline, its long-term funding strategy won't be ready in time for the next elections in 2020. Kleiss explains why.
I think the most important point is that the picture on what our funding needs will be is likely to evolve, and it will change, and hopefully downward, in a downward direction.
The city is currently negotiating with water quality regulators, hoping for more time to comply with the law. That could make its obligations a little cheaper. O'Malley says the city has waited long enough, but he doesn't blame city staff for the stormwater division's shortcomings. He says ultimately, elected officials are the ones who are failing to lead.
If stormwater is a hidden infrastructure project, it's not very sexy, right? You have housing, you have transit. Those are things that are forefront and center. But no one has really stepped up to be the champion for stormwater and for clean water in our region, to recognize that there is this gap and step up for it. So what we're working to do is identify that leader and really work with that person to come up with measures to fund stormwater.
One thing city staff have agreed to implement: a public outreach campaign, educating residents about the need for more money for stormwater. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The storms have passed for now. Daji Aswad has details on some chilly nights ahead.
Pretty calm here across Southern California for today, and as we continue through tonight, not too much to be worried about. Most of that moisture, as you can see on the last few hours of the satellite and radar, back towards our north and out towards our east. So if you have any plans in towards the plains, they're dealing with a massive system that encompasses snow as well as severe weather from north to south. But here at home, once again, we're removed from all of that. We're mainly clear tonight in San Diego with a low of 50. As we head in towards San Diego County as a whole, pretty calm as well for Borrego Springs, the low of 41, cooling down to 33 in Mount Laguna and 42 in towards Oceanside. Not too much to worry about tomorrow, except cold air and moving in from the northwest. Going to be some snow in towards the higher elevations out towards Central California there. Also going to get some snow in towards Nevada, Utah, extending in towards Arizona. Now that cold, windy air is something that we got to keep an eye on for your extended forecast. But for Thursday, we're topping off at 64 in Oceanside. Also going to be topping off at 64 in San Diego, high of 66 in Borrego Springs and 46 in Mount Laguna with lots of sunshine. We continue to look ahead here. Winds will increase through your Saturday, and then we'll also be talking about the frost potential in towards the mountains and valleys due to that cold air coming down from the north. So here's a look at the future winds. We head here into Friday around noon. Winds coming out of the north there, 27 miles per hour, Borrego Springs, anticipated 23 in Mount Laguna. And the San Diego still going to be on the calm side. We don't really see San Diego's winds pick on up until we head into your Saturday around noon, 16 miles per hour, and then possibly getting into the 20 mile per hour range as we continue on. Now this weekend, still going to be on the dry side across the region as a whole, but once again, that cold air is what we have to look out for our lows. Coast in the 60s for your highs, dropping down into the 30s. Inland also going to be in the 60s for your highs with lots of sunshine. And as we head into the mountains, 36 for your Friday. Chilly conditions, 23 for your low. And we'll continue to see that chilly air for Saturday. That's when we have the chance for some frost. And also, once again, in towards those valley areas, could be talking about some very low temperatures into your Friday and Saturday night. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Daji Aswad. Back to you, Susan.
Christmas is over, but your Christmas tree has a chance at a second life. KPBS reporter Taryn Mento says the city of San Diego will transform your evergreen into mulch and compost.
Two men unloaded dozens of evergreens at the Miramar landfill greenery. These trees that didn't sell this holiday season, and the one you may need to toss, will become mulch and compost through the city's 45th annual tree recycling program. The city of San Diego will accept trees for free from city residents at the landfill or several other drop-off locations through January 23rd. San Diego City Councilman Chris Cate says the initiative is a huge space saver.
Last year, the city's tree recycling program helped divert over 1,300 tons of Christmas trees from the Miramar landfill, which is approximately 163,000 Christmas trees.
I Love a Clean San Diego's Len Herring says it also gives the firs, spruces, and pines another purpose.
Mulch helps retain moisture in the ground, thus saving water, and beautifies the area as well.
You can recycle your tree and wreath at one of 16 sites or at your curb if you have a green yard waste container. Otherwise, it goes to the landfill. Trees with artificial snow are permitted, but they must be free of ornaments and other materials. Those in yard waste containers must be less than 4 feet in height or cut in half. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
Is climate change affecting how plants reproduce? Earlier this year, KPBS education reporter Megan Burks trekked to the desert with some San Diego State researchers who are trying to find out.
This is a very diverse area.
Just as Interstate 8 drops down the bouldery pass into the Imperial Valley, a stone structure called Desert View Tower has offered motorists sweeping views of the desert floor since 1923.
We probably need to label this one.
Now, it could offer a glimpse into how climate change is affecting native plants.
You know what, let's go to the ones on the top.
Lluvia Flores Renteria is an evolutionary plant ecologist at San Diego State University. The tower's owners are letting her and her students track the reproductive cycle of the cholla cacti on their property.
Cylindropuntia wolfia is the scientific name, but the common name is Wolf's cholla.
Wolf's cholla is common in Southern California's desert, waist-high tangles of cylindrical sections covered in fine spines. At sunset, the spines catch the sunlight and give off a show-stopping glow. But Flores Renteria and master's student Ryan Buck noticed this year the cholla skipped their spring show of red and yellow blooms. Except those at the tower. They fared better thanks to a weekly drink of water. So the two are back to see if the flowers developed fruit and in them, seeds.
So if you see a large fruit that looks juicy, let me know.
Studies on the East Coast have found widespread changes in plant reproductive cycles as the earth warms.
The fruit is also dry.
On the West Coast, a $1.5 million grant from the National Science Foundation will help researchers like Flores Renteria ask whether that's happening here and whether it's linked to climate change.
This year, we've seen a shift, but we don't know if it's related to precipitation patterns or temperature or something else, right? So if we have historical data, then we can start asking these questions.
And all of these are ferns, fern relatives.
That historical data lives here, pressed onto paper and filed away in cabinets deep in the Life Sciences building at San Diego State.
And I'm just pulling this out. This was collected in 1941, April 30th. There's a lot of detail that we can study. We could dissect a flower. We could soak it up in boiling water. We could look at the fruits. We can look at the plant hairs called trichomes, so we can still see a lot, even though this is nearing 100 years old. But we can also take that leaf and extract DNA.
With the NSF grant, herbaria across the state will upload high-resolution photos of their specimens and information about where and when they were collected to a central online database.
As we do this for all of California, we can begin to get an idea as to when they flowered, when they fruited in the past versus the present.
And they can use a digital map to make comparisons by location.
One hypothesis is they're today flowering earlier in the season. And we don't have enough data to prove that, but I think we'll have enough data in about 3 years.
Back at Desert View Tower, Flores Renteria scours cholla after cholla looking for fruit.
Right. But I cannot really find anything. That's sad.
Even on the sections covered with protective bags, where Flores Renteria pollinated the flowers by hand, the fruit dried out before it could mature.
The other thing is that when we came here and we did the pollinations, the manual pollinations, we saw the bees. The bees were very active, so that's very important. So the natural pollination occurred and our manual pollination occurred, but as you can see, all of the fruits are being aborted. So that's kind of scary, really, to see all of these plants not reproducing sexually.
The plant can still clone itself by dropping sections off its branches to take root elsewhere.
No fruits formed.
But student Ryan Buck says the adaptation isn't a fail-safe.
Just imagine that you bud off and you start cloning and there's just a whole population of you, and let's say you're allergic to strawberries and the only food source you have is strawberries. Every single one of you is going to die because you can't eat. So there's not enough genetic diversity to keep going if it's just budding and cloning off the whole time. Some species can evolve and adapt to that, but that's going to take a lot of time, man. At the rate that climate change is going, they don't have that much time.
And the plants will look a lot drier.
Buck and Flores Renteria will continue to track the cholla to see if this year is an anomaly or a symptom of climate change. In the meantime, they'll take the spiky dried fruit back to the office to see if they can salvage some seeds.
And it's very, very spiny.
Megan Burks, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.